Yesterday, we showed you a number of Republican senators, including Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, criticizing Fox News over how one of its primetime hosts has portrayed the January 6th attack on the Capitol using select footage from the day provided by House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Yesterday, President Biden joined those Republicans in speaking out against Fox News for allowing that whitewashing of the insurrection. The president tweeted, more than 140 officers were injured on January 6th. I've said before, how dare anyone diminish or deny the hell they went through. I stand with the Capitol Police. I hope House Republicans feel ashamed for what was done to undermine our law enforcement. A White House spokesman also released a statement saying, quote, we agree with the chief of the Capitol Police and the wide range of bipartisan lawmakers who have condemned this false depiction of the unprecedented violent attack on our Constitution and the rule of law, which cost police officers their lives. Willie?
And an important part of this story is that it all comes against the backdrop of a $1.6 billion defamation suit against Fox News by Dominion Voting Systems. As part of that suit's discovery process, hundreds of pages of evidence, including full excerpts of testimony from depositions, along with text messages and emails, have been published, providing an inside look at how network executives and hosts not only knew claims the 2020 election was rigged were false, but that they had open contempt for former President Trump. Now, Trump and his son, Don Jr., have taken to attacking the network in recent weeks, with the former president going after Fox chairman Rupert Murdoch by name, while his son, Don Jr., has accused executives at the network of harboring an America Last, War Forever garbage fold to the Democrats' agenda. That's a quote from Don Jr. there. Joe, it remains perplexing that some parts of Fox News, but mostly that Republicans in the Congress and that former President Trump want to reopen this wound of January 6th and revisit it and give President Biden and give the rest of the country who believes its own eyes the opportunity to relitigate that terrible day.
Well, and it's just so stupid politically. We've said it here day in and day out. Republicans, and I guarantee you that Republicans in the Senate that are being critical, even Lindsey Graham accusing them of and other people of whitewashing the news. It is so stupid for Republicans. They're splitting their party in half. They're turning voters that had voted Republican their entire lives against them. And now you're seeing actually the 45th president and the 46th president attacking the same news network. And, you know, my gosh, this is sort of an ideological, a political civil war, Jonathan Lemire, where you now have Donald Trump attacking Fox News and Fox News hosts heaping extraordinary contempt against the ex-president.
Yeah, it's been extraordinary to see because we're getting looks now at these text messages that were sent in real time, that were sent during the final days of the Trump administration, during his effort to have the election overturned in the wake in November, December, and then, of course, around January 6th. And I think it just shows in full display the hypocrisy and the lies that Fox News hosts would say one thing on air, say that Donald Trump had a case to make, that the election may have been stolen, and then off-air suggests that, of course, they knew that he was lying. And we should keep that in mind as we consider what one Fox News host in particular in the evening is doing to try to downplay what happened on January 6th. And I think Joe and Mika and Willie, it will be useful to go through some of these text messages the New York Times has reported from one host in particular, Mr. Carlson, in the evening. He has said these things about Donald Trump per the lawsuit with Dominion. He said that Trump is good at destroying things. He's an undisputed world champion of that. He has said that on Trump's decision to skip Biden's inauguration, it's disgusting. I'm trying to look away. He has badmouthed Sidney Powell, of course, who was Donald Trump's lawyer at the time. He said that he hates Trump passionately. I hate him passionately. And then he said this, Willie. He called Tucker Carlson called Donald Trump a demonic force, a destroyer. But he's not going to destroy us. I've been thinking about this every day for 4 years. He said, we've got 2 weeks left. We can do this. That was sent on January 6th. And again, I think it's so instructive to pull back the curtain here and see what he thought in real time while he said something so very different on air and continues to push those lies to this very day.
Well, it's nothing.
Wow.
It's nothing new for supporters of Donald Trump. We've been talking for years about, for those 4 years that he was saying he worried about every day, we've been talking about members of the House, members of the Senate, Republican leaders throughout the states heaping contempt on Donald Trump behind the scenes, saying how much they hated him, Republicans saying how much they loathed him, Republicans saying how ill-suited he was for the presidency, and then the camera lights would turn on and they would lie to their voters. They would lie to their constituents. And David Ignatius, what is so extraordinary here is it's all out in the open, right? And it's all we've known this for forever, because you've talked to Republican leaders, as have I through the years, who would heap contempt on Donald Trump behind the scenes but never say it publicly. They would tell their base what they thought their base wanted to hear. Now we have this extraordinary moment in American democracy where you have the majority of one party actually being fed lies and actually believing those lies and spreading those lies, not only about an American election, an American presidential election that even the biggest disinformation broadcasters are saying was won by Joe Biden, but they're not only lying about that, but now they're lying in the middle of a lawsuit, for God's sake, in the middle of a lawsuit about what happened on January 6th. And the brave law enforcement officers, the cops who were beaten up, beaten within inches of their lives, and lying about cops who lost their lives. David, it's extraordinary. How does a political party continue to exist based around these toxic lies that are now being shouted from the mountaintops?
You know, Joe, political parties are unfortunately pretty good at living with hypocrisy. And as you say, we've seen that two-faced approach from Republicans through the Trump years. Like you, I've heard so many Republicans in private criticize what he's doing, express concern about its effects on the country, and then go right out in public and support him because they're afraid. They're afraid of their base. What's striking about the Dominion lawsuit is that we're seeing that hypocrisy baked into what's supposedly a news network. And seeing some of this testimony and depositions, you realize, I hate to say it, how far Fox has strayed from being a reliable source of news. People say things in private that are accurate, honest assessments of Trump, and then go on the air and make claims that are divisive to the country. You have a sense that, like the Republican politicians you and I were talking about, Fox is chasing what it imagines its viewers, the public on the right, want to hear. And that's just never a good position. And I wonder how Fox is going to recover from this if Rupert Murdoch and others really want the network to become more stable again after the Trump period.
Joe mentioned Senator Lindsey Graham. Here's what he said yesterday. Quote, this is Lindsey Graham saying, I don't want to be part of any day. I don't want to take any part in whitewashing January 6th. It wasn't a stroll to the Capitol. It was an attack on our Capitol. The people involved in violence should go to jail, said Lindsey Graham yesterday, saying again, it was not a peaceful day.